You won't believe what happened to me last week. A completely unhinged building manager invaded my property, claiming he had the right to a mandatory sanitary inspection. He showed up with a locksmith, broke down my gate, and even had the audacity to threaten me with fines and lawsuits. What he didn't know is that I spent 30 years of my life sitting behind a very specific desk, a judge's bench. And when he discovered who I really was, the color drained from his face faster than water down a drain. Stay until the end because this story will show you that sometimes justice has a very particular way of making itself known. Problem presentation. My name is Robert, I'm 62 years old, and I retired 5 years ago after an entire career in the judiciary. I bought a house in a gated community to have my final years in peace, tend to my garden, and enjoy time with my wife. The property is beautiful, with spacious grounds where I grow some vegetables and have a small workshop where Edo woodworking, my lifelong hobby. I never bothered anyone, always paid my HOA fees on time, and kept my property immaculate. The building manager, a man in his 40s named Carlos, was always problematic. Since he took the position 2 years ago, he transformed into what I used to see a lot in court. Small people with small power, but who use that power disproportionately. He created absurd rules, like prohibiting ornamental plants on balconies, controlling the color of curtains visible from outside, and even establishing schedules for using power tools, including drills for small home repairs. Conflict escalation. It all started when I decided to install a small greenhouse in my backyard to protect my seedlings during winter. It was a simple, transparent structure that didn't obstruct anyone's view and was completely within my property limits. The day after installation, I received a formal notification demanding immediate removal of the irregular construction. I went to the administration to try to talk civilly. Explained it was just a temporary greenhouse that didn't violate any internal community regulations. Carlos received me with impressive arrogance. He said that as building manager, he had authority to interpret rules as he saw fit, and that my greenhouse devalued collective property. When I tried to argue by citing some articles from the Civil Code about private property, he interrupted me saying he didn't need law lessons from a retiree who doesn't understand building administration. The tone was so disrespectful that I preferred to end the conversation right there. I removed the greenhouse to avoid bigger conflicts, but this only encouraged more abuse. In the following weeks, I received notifications about my grass height, which according to him was 2 centimeters above standard. About the time I watered my garden, apparently disturbing the morning silence, and even about the type of fertilizer I used, claiming it might attract insects. Each notification came with threats of progressive fines that could reach absurd amounts. Climax, the invasion. The situation reached its limit on a Tuesday morning. I was in my workshop, sanding a table I was restoring for my granddaughter, when I heard strange noises at the gate. I went out to check and found Carlos with a locksmith, literally forcing entry into my property. When I questioned what was happening, he showed me a document he had written himself, claiming he had the right to an emergency sanitary inspection based on anonymous complaints about possible environmental contamination. "Mr. Robert," he said with a mocking smile, "as building manager, I have legal right to inspect any property that represents a risk to collective health. Several people complained about chemical odors coming from your property. It was a blatant lie. The only chemicals I used were wood varnish and organic fertilizer for plants. Either you allow the inspection voluntarily or I call the police and force a judicial inspection." Can you imagine my indignation? 40 years dealing with justice taught me to recognize abuse of authority from afar. But it also taught me that sometimes it's better to let someone hang themselves with their own rope. I allowed him to enter, accompanying every step. Carlos ransacked my workshop, photographed my household cleaning products as if they were crime evidence, and even had the audacity to question why I had so many power tools. "A man your age shouldn't be messing with these dangerous things," he said, as if he were my father. Revelation and turnaround. The last straw was when he tried to confiscate a bottle of paint remover, claiming it was an undeclared chemical substance. It was at that moment I decided the theater had lasted long enough. "Carlos," I said, maintaining the calm I learned in decades of tense hearings, I think you don't know exactly who you're dealing with." He laughed and replied, "I know exactly. Mr. Robert, a retiree who thinks he can do whatever he wants just because he has a big house." I went to my office and returned with a document he immediately recognized. It was my bar association card, still valid, along with a copy of my retirement from the Court of Justice. "Dr. Robert Silva, retired judge from civil court," I introduced myself formally. 30 years of career, specialized in civil law, private property, and abuse of authority. The transformation on his face was instantaneous. Arrogance gave way to pure panic. "Doctor, I didn't know," he began to stutter. "Didn't know what, Carlos? That property invasion is a crime? That falsifying official documents, like this sanitary inspection paper of yours, is a crime? That coercion is a crime?" I took my phone and started photographing all the products he had touched, now out of place. "You documented your own invasion, Carlos. How convenient. Consequences and justice." I explained to Carlos that he had committed at least 4 crimes: home invasion, document forgery, coercion, and abuse of authority. I showed him exactly which articles of the penal code he had violated and what the penalty would be for each one. I also explained that as building manager, he had no legal right to invade private properties, even within the condominium, and that the only authorities with that right would be police officers with judicial warrant or official sanitary agents with specific order from public authority. "But doctor," he tried to argue, "I was just trying to protect the condominium." "Carlos," I interrupted, "after 3 decades seeing people try to justify crimes with good intentions, I can guarantee that never worked as a defense. You weren't protecting anyone. You were abusing your power because you don't like me." I offered him 2 options. First, he could resign from the building manager position immediately, formally apologize in writing to all residents he had persecuted with his abusive rules, and revoke all irregular notifications he had issued. The second option would be me filing a police report and prosecuting both him and the condominium for all crimes committed, plus filing a moral damages lawsuit. The choice is yours, but you have exactly 24 hours to decide. Outcome: Carlos chose the first option. The next day, I received a resignation letter filed with the condominium administration, along with apologies to me and 6 other residents who had been persecuted with invented rules. All irregularly applied fines were canceled, and he even paid out of his own pocket for repairs to my gate, which had been damaged during the invasion. The most interesting thing is that after other residents learned about my profession, many came to tell me about abuses they had suffered in silence. An elderly lady had been fined for feeding birds on her own balcony. A young couple was threatened with eviction for leaving children's bicycles in the recreation area during a birthday party. A retiree was prohibited from using his motorized wheelchair in the corridors because it made excessive noise. Carlos had created a small kingdom of terror based on people's ignorance about their own rights. Call to action and closing. This story taught me something I want to share with all of you. Knowledge is power, but more importantly, knowledge is protection. Often people in small authority positions count on our ignorance about our rights to intimidate us and abuse the power they have. It doesn't matter if it's a building manager, a property administrator, an inspector of anything. Nobody has the right to invade your property, confiscate your belongings, or threaten you with false legal consequences. If you're going through a similar situation, document everything, know your rights, and don't be afraid to seek legal help when necessary. Sometimes the only language these people understand is properly applied law. And remember, no matter how old you are, it's never too late to learn how to defend yourself within legality. If this story was useful to you, leave your like down below. It helps me a lot to continue sharing experiences that might be useful to other people. And subscribe to the channel because I have many other stories about how legal knowledge can be our best defense against abuse of authority. Until next time, and remember, justice sometimes takes time, but when it arrives, it's accurate.